All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let me tell you what we're doing right now. We're getting ready to release some of the archive that we found from when we were the sci-fi shenanigans. We're going to get those up there for the posts that were brought down. We thought you might enjoy them, and so without further ado, let us roll that beautiful. Oh wait, they're going to sue me. Play it.
Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. And without further ado...
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. Today, we have as our special guest... artiste John Gibbons and returning guest Walt Robillard.
I acknowledge nothing.
That's okay.
I must get your last name right, Walt.
I have made sure that thing is a vague book extraordinaire so that I can get as many people as possible to murder the hell out of it.
Well done, sir. Well done.
I see your evil plan, and I will raise you a s'mores.
I was on the s'mores. Oh no! I was on Keystroke Medium a few weeks ago, and Kayleen said my name and was like, and said it like 4 different ways, and she's like, "Did I get any of that right?" I said it was all right. It was perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So the next part of the introduction is where we talk about the various guests. So first I'm going to introduce John Gibbons, who hasn't been on the podcast before, and he doesn't have a bio. In fact, we don't even know if John exists or if he's what Walt calls his imaginary friend. I mean, if you can't find a bio on the internet, right, can they really be real? So imaginary friend, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So my name is John Gibbons. I'm obviously, from my great accent compared to these American gits, I'm from the UK. Currently reside in Manchester, in the northern part of England. I am a freelance illustrator for the gaming industry, role-playing games, board games, and also I do the occasional book covers for very talented writers like Walt.
I love you.
Yeah, well, plug. And yeah, so basically I've been illustrating for probably around 15 years on a professional basis. Been a gamer all my life. Yeah, you know what? God, that's about it, really. What more can I say?
You weren't going to confess?
No, okay, I will confess.
Come on, we know you're a secret agent for the Illuminati.
Yes, the third eye on my forehead that gives it away.
It does. Yeah. We should try to hide it a little better, makeup or something. But
and the accent, because all bad guys in fiction always have your accent, don't they?
It's absolutely true. Or Russian.
No, I've never, ever heard any English bad guy in American film with a Mancunian accent. You all think we've got the same bloody accent, and we haven't.
It all sounds the same.
American films don't speak proper English. They speak this bizarre American film English.
Look, when you've had your head scrambled by as many IEDs as I have, everybody sounds the same. All right, so now we get to introduce our second guest who's been on the show before, Walt Robillard. I'm trying to say it as many ways as I can, so I will beat the great and mighty Kayleen. So Walt is a longtime Rhode Island resident who lives with his loving wife, Loyal Pup, and an annoying cat. When not spilling ink all over the page, he can be found not talking about Fight Club and spilling blood while he's not talking about it. After drinking lots of coffee in the U.S. Army, he left to pursue his various interests and probably to save his small intestines from said bad Army coffee. And that's Walt. We could tell you more, but he has Illuminati friends.
We'd have to kill you.
It's true. Thank you for the kind introduction.
I try and shamelessly stole it from your Amazon page, so
Right on.
a little bit of cheating.
Which they stole, or which I pilfered from my own website because, I don't want to put too many details. I want people to work for it.
That's cool. I mean, I didn't appreciate, looking out my window and seeing you hanging from the tree, but other than that, you're doing it right.
Oh, well, the good part was you saw me hanging from the tree. You didn't see the dog standing right behind you.
He trained his warhound. In fact, if you watch any of the fantasy movies where they got the giant, almost a horse warhounds, that's because he trained them.
That's right. And actually, my current warhound has been Tuckerized. So,
what the hell's that?
it's when somebody takes your real life whatever and then puts it in a book or fiction property.
I've got a bit in common with because, like you guys, I'm ex-serviceman, and I used to be a police dog trainer in the military. So,
hell yeah,
that's my background from many years ago.
I got to tell you, man, that picture that you showed me some years ago with you and the dog, that was epic.
Yeah,
very, very epic looking picture.
All right, and the second part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we found them. So I found this motley crew through Walt, who's active in the Galaxy's Edge fan club. When he started preparing for an anthology from a shared RPG world, it caught my attention, and I invited them onto the show to talk about the RPG and hopefully a little bit about the anthology they're going to be doing later this year or next, sometime ish. So what about you, Winder? How'd you first find these fine folks?
Well, Walt and I met at a con. We didn't actually go there for the same, to meet. We went there because we both wanted to meet our hero, John. It wasn't a cosplay kind of con, though. It was a professional kind where they actually have meetings and you have to attend the right things. Turns out that John is a root beer connoisseur. And he actually sets industry standards for how delicious root beer has to be. And so everyone in the United States who actually likes root beer, which is probably 99% of the population, can thank John for his impeccable taste.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love this stuff. In fact, I'm looking in my room now. I've got so many empty bottles on shelves around them.
Oh my God, he's gonna hunt you down.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about beer or root beer on your shelves, John? Let's just clarify.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, of course. Yeah, beer, not root beer. I mean, who the hell calls it root beer anyway? It's not. It's just some nasty medicine in the bottle. It's not beer. I mean, for God's sake, come on.
It's sarsaparilla. It'll make you run faster and jump higher.
Yeah.
Or run to the bathroom faster, maybe.
Yeah.
But, we beggars can't be choosers, right?
Right. All right. So the religion question, we're going to go with John first. And I have my mouse over the kick button. Star Wars, okay. Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Trek.
Oh. Why?
The original series. Though.
Oh, perfect. That's my favorite too. But why?
Yeah. Because I was brought up on it. So in the UK at the time when I was being brought up, so kind of like the mid-70s, there wasn't a huge amount of science fiction on television. We didn't have the number of channels that you guys did probably in that day. So for us, it was kind of like you were either into Doctor Who, which was the mainstream in the UK, but the only real science fiction program that did the rounds were reruns of Star Trek, the original series. So for me, that was my main taste to get into sci-fi during my youth, really, and I was brought up on it. So it was a big deal. I mean, you had as the years passed by, you had kind of like British TV started to bring things out, like say Space 1999 and Blake 7, but they were more kind of like the sort of early 80s. But when I was young, I always remember Star Trek.
Okay. And what about you, Walt?
Do you want me to repeat my answer from the last time I was here?
I don't know. Has it changed?
No, hell no.
Well, repeat it anyway. People might not have listened, and if you haven't listened, what the heck's your problem?
Yeah, right? Exactly. Find me now. I don't think my episode is aired yet. I think it might be
Uh,
Holding.
Been censored.
Oh, that's right. It was the introduction to the short stories you narrated, and then I don't know whatever happened to those. So answer for the first time and pretend you didn't say it already.
Yes, I was definitely a Star Wars kid, and just because of the fact that it showed that anybody could be somebody. I mean, because God knows we know the hero of the story, the whole story. Was actually just seen for only a moment in Return of the Jedi, and then we find out later he was actually a clone commando the whole time.
Spoilers. Jeez.
Wow.
Yes, because I'm spoiling this 40-year-old property. But I enjoyed Star Wars because it was gritty, it was damaged, it was dirty. These guys had to fight against overwhelming odds with the stupidest tactics known to man and try and overcome a vastly superior force. Because they knew they were right. Not because of some warped sense of morality or fascist agenda or whatever the current buzzword is, but they knew that the current government wasn't working because the people were suffering, and just a couple of people with the right attitude had to do something about it. And as a kid, that really spoke to me because I mean, my family are all immigrants, and and when you're coming from that background, you really don't fit in anywhere. So to see like this, I mean, if a giant 9-foot tall like gorilla dog creature could be seen as like a hero, why couldn't I? Why couldn't my friends? If we can't fit in with the general of society, maybe there's a crew somewhere on some dirty, dusty rust bucket flying through space that we can fit into, and that's really what I enjoyed about Star Wars. It was more about that family you build versus the family you started with, which was really cool for me.
But you see, I agree with that, Walt. But I think the thing that bothered me a bit about Star Wars is I remember, like everyone else, being a young kid and queuing up and going to see Star Wars and being completely blown away by it, and then having to wait a couple of years before Empire and a few more years for Return of the Jedi. And it was great because you were not inundated with the social media or the amount of other stuff that was pumped into it like is today. So basically, you watched the film and you had to wait 2 to 2 years for the next one to come out, and you had nothing in between really, apart from say some sticker albums or something crazy, But it's like I found what spoilt Star Wars for me is too much. I think beyond that. Because, for example, I remember watching the original Star Wars and you had the stormtroopers, and to me, they were guys, normal squaddies, in their white armored uniforms who were there for whatever reason. And then when you start watching the latest ones and find out everyone was like a clone warrior, I think that spoilt it. But that's just my kind of like two pennies worth. I think, the original 3 films were great, but I think it's been spoiled by the influx of too much information.
Oh yeah, because I mean, if you saw what happened after, those first 3 movies, there was a lull, and the only thing keeping Star Wars in the public consciousness, even though it wasn't as wide as it would have been today, was the Star Wars role playing game. In fact, when later on, when Timothy Zahn was brought in to write the books that would follow 5 years after the Return of the Jedi. That's what they did. They handed him copies of the Star Wars role-playing game, and they said, check this out. This has everything you need to know. And I think that right after that, once Timothy Zahn reached that level of success with Heir to the Empire, which just exploded for fans who were just hungry for content, you ended up with something like 50 or 60 books that followed in that one series. And now now that's all legends and pushed to the side, and now they have new content coming out. So I absolutely agree that there's too much too quickly, and nobody has time to breathe and savor and enjoy. But I think that's kind of a thing from the Netflix era of doing everything. Everybody wants binge content, and they want it now.
It is, and I think with it is kind of like I think in a way it stunts your imagination a bit though, because I remember, like I say, going to see the original 3 films, and there wasn't much other stuff. I actually bought the books at the time, which were books written by, what was the guy's name who wrote all the books on the original screenplay? Quite a famous guy, did a lot of movie books. Oh, an author. I can't think of his name.
And as a side note, John, just make sure to mention as many cultural references as possible. JR loves this,
especially obscure ones.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but there was an author, and he was famous for writing. So a film would come out, say Star Wars or Return of the Jedi, and then he would then write the novel based on the film. And he did, and he was quite a famous author, and he did a lot of these kind of big blockbuster movies. I can't think of his name, but it's been so long. But anyway, I remember watching the 3 films and being blown away, and then picking up the books. But I found the books hit me more emotionally, say, than the films. So, for example, the films are great. They were a spectacular visual art, and it, as a young kid, it gave you what you want. But, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, I Returned the Jedi, the novel, and I remember crying in bed as I was reading the bit when Darth Vader dies at the end. Well, I never did that watching the film itself. So I think the books actually gave more, because there wasn't a huge amount of stuff out there to feed you. You were engrossing it, and you had to use your own imagination and seek out smaller other things that would get you involved with the Star Wars universe, rather than being bombarded by, here's the answer to this, here's that. This is what these guys are all about.
Nice, yeah.
I will find Alpha's name. I'm determined to find his name.
George Lucas?
Yeah. Oh, no.
That guy can't write.
No.
First, while he's looking, just let me say Team Darth Vader. Darth Vader did nothing wrong. The rebel terrorist scum destroyed a whole military installation, killing hundreds of thousands of people. Jeez.
All those tax dollars down the drain.
Mm-hmm. All they do is want to keep peace and stability in the Empire.
All right, so while John's looking.
Have you watched those what they called now? The same guys, I think, who did Team America. They do like they're kind of like plasticine, kind of like movies. God Almighty! I'm terrible. You shouldn't even have got me on this podcast. I'm the worst person to talk about. No, you see them like you see them on Facebook when it's like alternate sort of like things. It's all.
I've seen a lot of what you're talking about,
and it's really fun. I can't think what it's bloody called now. I'm still trying to find his name of this author, this goddamn author who wrote this book. It's going to be my...
Okay. Well, while he's thinking about it, Walt, what was your first memory of watching, reading, or playing games in the science fiction genre?
Watching, that would be something that John mentioned, actually. Space 1999.
Oh, my God.
Right? How good was that?
He used to shit me.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was my first watching. Reading. Oh God. I started reading fantasy before I started reading science fiction.
Me too.
Once I got into science fiction, I read Starship Troopers for the first time as a kid and was blown away. And then they came out with that movie, and I wanted to like rage quit life. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
The movie is awesome, sir.
But, yeah, it's something, all right. But then,
apart from her crazy smile, the one.
10 more minutes.
But then
10 more minutes.
But 10 more minutes.
No, that's the line from the movie.
Oh yeah. But then playing games, I started Dungeons and Dragons when I was in junior high school.
Yeah,
and then while I was in the Army, they came out with the Star Wars role playing game, and I was just like, yes, this is amazing. So. Really enjoyed that as well, and like I said, there was a wealth of information in those, but those led to that was like a rabbit hole, because any store that carried that particular game also carried Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, It was just a love fest of science fiction in gaming, and it really filled those spaces in between deployments.
Oh, the original Cyberpunk role playing game was amazing.
Right.
Absolutely, I
And how
love
about a
that
lot of that
game.
art that was in there?
Yeah, nice black and white, crazy art, and the cover was beautiful.
Yes.
The cover was a great, yeah, absolutely, it was stunning. But you know what? I picked that. I might even still have a copy of that somewhere in my thing. But I was reading through it it must have been about a year ago, looking at the technology, and it was like they talked about a personal computer. uh, in the equipment section, and when you look at the personal computer in the equipment section, it's got a memory of about 10 kilobytes or 100
Yeah, it was
kilobytes.
tiny.
They got it so wrong. You know what I mean? It's bizarre because, it's like no one envisions just how much technology advances, even when you're writing a novel. You know what I mean? It's easy to kind of to portray the way you think technology will work when it's technology that doesn't exist now. But when you're trying to sort of imagine how current technology develops, it becomes very difficult and usually quite wrong.
Okay, well, what was your first memory, John? Was it Star Trek?
Yeah, like I say, so for me, it was Star Trek was the very start of my kind of my science fiction hit, really. And I used to, it used to be on one of our channels, but again, it wasn't kind of like we didn't have the luxury of having like the full run of it, so you didn't get kind of like series 1 and series 2. You might get episode 4 of season 3, and then next week it might be episode 2 of season 3. You know what I mean? It's
Okay.
just it was just all over the place. But the good thing about Star Trek was you didn't have to watch it in order.
Right.
Every individual Star Trek episode was its own little unique story, which is what I used to like about things like you talk about Space 1999 and Doctor Who. Back in the day, that's the way it was written. I don't watch Doctor Who now because they've gone down the usual route of it's almost kind of like now an entire season is one story. So you have to watch the entire season to know what's going on. So when I was a kid, every Doctor Who TV program started off with the noise of the TARDIS. The TARDIS would appear in a planet or in a spaceship, and that episode was the adventure of the Doctor wherever he is. Tune in next week and a completely different adventure. So that spoils it for me. The way it's gone nowadays, the way they've tried to turn it too much into a soap opera. And I think that was because that was the nature of British television at the time, where we got a lot of our stuff from America. I think obviously the May must have worked with the TV channels. They couldn't maybe purchase all of the seasons. I don't know, but we got it in very sporadic bursts. So it was an amazing thing at the time to sort of watch stuff like that. And then role playing games came along for me, like Walt, when I was probably about 14. But again, it wasn't a UK thing. There was a girl who I used to go to school with. Her dad travelled around the world a bit. He'd been to the States and brought back a box set of the original Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
Gave it to her as a present. She brought it into school and was like, look what I've got, guys. And we were like, well, what is it? We'd not heard of role-playing games, no idea what they're about. They gave it to me because I was the sci-fi junkie, So I got the time at home and looking at it, and I was like, well, where's the board? What's going on? How do you play this? And it took quite a bit of experimentation before we even knew what to do and how to go about doing a role-playing game. It was a bit of a bizarre kind of like circumstance, really. And that's where my habit started in role playing business, really, when I was very young, like 14, 15. Never looked back.
So when you guys started playing, was D&D and role playing games trendy, or was it something the nerds did and you had to hide?
Well, for me, like I say, it was a non. If you said to any kid in the early 80s in the UK, what's Dungeons and Dragons, they would look at you and go, I've never heard of Dungeons and Dragons. So it didn't have that geeky sort of nerdy stereotype that you would expect. It just wasn't on the radar of anybody.
Okay, what about you, Walt?
It was definitely nerdy. If you wanted a date for the prom, you didn't tell anybody that you were gaming. You know,
you didn't go to the prom in your Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt and your whistle.
yes, yeah, no, definitely not. And then in the Army, it was funny because usually if you were approached for gaming, it was because you were reading something that kind of tied into it. Somebody I ended up reading The Lord of the Rings late. I was on a deployment and somebody had a copy. And I eventually read through the whole series, and they said, well, I was looking for other things to read. And they said, if you like this, you should try Dragonlance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I picked up the first book, and I was on a deployment, and somebody looked at me and said, what's that? Is that like Lord of the Rings? And I said, yeah, a little bit. And he goes, oh man, I've been looking for something else to read. He's like, cause and he, now this isn't like, we weren't admin. These were like hard ass infantry dudes. And he's looking around like he's about to sell me a fucking kilo of Coke. And he's like, hey, I play Dungeons and Dragons and I need a fix. So after you're done, can I read that? I'm like, really? This guy's like 9 feet tall, 4.5 feet wide. Door frames quiver when he walks up because they know they're going to die as he passes through. And he was like an ardent Dungeons and Dragons player, and that's usually how you encountered it in the wild. Back then, that was early '90s. But nowadays, it's like oh, you've never played Dungeons and Dragons? Well, and while it is very nice to be able to put your geek on the outside, there's almost like a sense of loss that, you're not going to know the struggles we went through for your D&D freedom, so it's really interesting the way that turned around.
It's so trendy now.
So basically hipsters ruined your fantasy, huh?
No.
I could have phrased that a little bit better.
All right. So, John, how'd you go from your love of science fiction to writing in it?
Well, yeah. So for me, it was kind of like, it was probably my hook on the role-playing game. So like I said, when I was about 14, I got into role-playing games, and then basically that was it. I soon became the de facto games master. So it was kind of like, it was like, oh yeah, John's a guy who'll run all the games for us. And then obviously things like writing and artwork come naturally from that. I've always been I'm not like you guys. I'm a very frustrated writer where I have lots and lots of concepts and ideas, but I don't have the patience, or probably B, I won't say the imagination, because I've got the imagination, but maybe the correct use of grammar to sort of put pen to paper. So my creative spurge, you could say, went down the artwork route. So now, regularly I'll come up with these ideas for these universes, like the After, or there was one called Extreme Earth that I did.
Oh my God, so good.
Yeah, and rather than kind of like writing it myself, I go look for the writers to do the writing for me, and just sort of do the artwork and the concept artwork around it to sort of spur them on, and that's how I get my fix. But yeah, everyone's got a novel, haven't they? And I used to spend when I was younger, any free time between creating art and say role playing, especially like when I was in the forces, where I did, unlike you guys who sound like you had sort of role playing buddies in the forces, there was nothing like that when I was there. So I used to be walking the wire, just thinking about novels and what novels I'd want to write, etc. But unfortunately, they never came to fruition because my creation part came from doing artwork. So it's kind of like, still in the back of my mind, I've probably got about half a dozen novels I'd like to pen one day, but I just know it's never going to happen because I've got the attention span of a gnat. So, it's kind of like, to me, it's just pen to paper and start drawing instead.
So what you have to do with those ideas is you have to track down your friends that are writers and approach them with those ideas and say, I'll give you the idea and you write it and you give me half the money.
Yeah.
But you got to do it at a con too. You got to do it at a convention. I'm told that's how it happens.
All right. So what about you, Walt?
Oh, I'm pretty much the same way as John. I just track people down and tell them to write shit.
Perfect.
No, I mean, I started in 2004 with Hazard Studio because I was very frustrated. I had gotten out of the comics industry, and I was frustrated that more people weren't drawing, writing, and whatever. Because at the time there was such a barrier to entry. It's not like it is today that you can go on Amazon, buy 4 programs, and suddenly you're producing books.
Yeah.
So I started Hazard Studio as a way to like increase that talent pool, and because I didn't want to be the only one. It worked. We made some really great associations, really great friendships and partnerships. We started drawing and writing. We've published, umpteenth amount of role playing game supplements. Millions of words written, tons of hours of gameplay. Lots of connections made. So I mean that's really how it started for me. Was it started through gaming, and the I didn't want my skills that I learned for drawing and stuff like that to atrophy, but I didn't want to work in comics because at the time, mid to late 90s, the comics industry was suffering a stroke, and it was not a good time to be working in that industry. So kudos to the people who survived it and, pulled out and, got rehab and, went to their 12-step groups because to be able to now transition into prose and stuff like that from the RPG side, it's been an adventure, especially when you get an editor that either tells you you're writing like you're writing a textbook, because that's usually how an RPG book is written, very similar to a textbook, or they're telling you, who told you could write?
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, so you take your bumps. It's just like any other skill. The more you do, the more you practice. The more you learn, and then you just go from there. So right on.
I had an editor once tell me I should just hire a ghostwriter, so I feel your pain. I got a new editor.
All right, so that's part of the show.
So you can't.
I'm sorry, that's part of the show where we go ahead and pause and shill for the man.
Well, hello, all you beautiful chicks and dudes of all sorts. This is Suave Rob Suarez, the XX Daredevil star of Suave Rob's amazing Saving Association, here with another saving tip, totally free from me to you, to help you save your so you can live to sit another day. Now, back in the day, when dudes were dudes, this one dude, Benchmark Bob, buddy of mine, he had this little accident. He tried frying up an egg when he was totally hammered, so he washed a pan, then didn't dry it, then put a load of butter in it, then turned on the heat. Well, when you do that, chicks and dudes, the water makes the oil go splatzo all over your own personal face. And good old Benchmark got his bench marked, if you know what I mean. Like, when he took his apron away from his face, it looked less like a face and more like someone had stepped on a pepperoni pizza. I don't like to think about it. But that goes to show you, always dry your pans before you put oil in them, man. Especially if you're frying an egg. Want to know where I learned all this gonzo shit? I got it all done up pretty for you in Suave Rob's XX Daring Do, the first book of Suave Rob's Awesome Adventures by J. Daniel Sawyer. Come share the awesomeness with me, my brothers, 'cause you never know. The ass you save may be your own.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us through that sweet, sweet commercial interlude. Did you hear it? The sound of the cha-ching! All right, and we are back. So before we went into the commercial, because Chris is a no-good, money-hungry person, you were saying something, John? Do you remember what it was? I know it's a few minutes ago.
Yeah. I was just, I know Walt mentioned comic books, and I think, again, a big influence on my sort of creative sort of background is probably American comics, and again, I can only talk about the way it was in the UK at the time, and you guys are so spoiled because that's where the comic industry started for you over there. But for me, American comics, DC and Marvel comics, when I was younger, was a huge aspect and positive impact on my life. But again, it was very, very sporadic because the UK must have bought American comics in huge batches. So you would go to the local news agents, or I don't know what you call them over in America, but over here it's a news agent, and you would search the shelves and find maybe 2 or 3 American comics, and it might be, say, Spider-Man issue 200, but then you might never see another issue of Spider-Man in again. So it was, you could never ever sort of pick up a series of comics and read a big batch of them in order. It was just individual comics from different ages and just read. But it was I used to have a big box under my bed, but they were all over the place, and different makers and different writers and different issues. So so that was a big influence, I think. Comics for me. I mean, Britain obviously had its comics like 2000 AD, which is quite a dark sort of sci-fi comic.
Brilliant.
Compared to what was out in America at the time, I suppose.
Heavy Metal would probably be the closest.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And Heavy Metal was great as well, although Heavy Metal was a little bit more there was a lot of soft porn in Heavy Metal as well, wasn't it? Let's face it, I had a couple of Heavy Metals underneath my mattress, that's what it was like when you were a kid, But yeah, 2000 AD was probably a huge influence because it was a massive thing in the UK at the time. But again, very dystopian in its views, and quite dark sort of comic serials in there compared to what was coming out from America at the time. But yeah, I see. Comic books were a big influence, I think, on me.
Okay. Well, you've just added more to the show notes, so we appreciate that. Thank you. And transitioning away from the writing creative side, let's talk about things from a little bit of a fan angle. So, has anyone asked for your autograph when out in public, away from conventions or regular book signing game events? I guess whatever the RPG equivalent of a book signing is.
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, I've been to a couple of conventions in the UK, and not so much in conventions, but I suppose for me it was in gaming shops. So there's a couple of gaming shops in Manchester, close to where I live, and I remember going to the gaming shops to sort of like to tag along and sort of play on a few tables, and I'm sort of sat there and I look over at a table and there's a game being run, which was Extreme Earth, which is one that I created. And it's like, oh, look, these guys. So I went over there and introduced myself. No one believes you. You're not this guy. No, I am. No, get out of it. And then there's someone else who's got another book that you've done a cover for or illustrated for. So that's happened quite a lot for me, which is pretty cool, especially when they ask you to sort of sign the cover. That's always a nice sort of ego trip. Let's face it, we all love it, don't we, deep down? That's been pretty good. But yeah, I suppose it's different from me from an artist's point of view, because even though art makes a huge impact to a role-playing game, also it has a huge impact on a novel, because you will know as well as I do. You walk into a bookstore and you're looking at 1,000 science fiction novels on the wall. It's the cover that originally gets you attracted to that book. That's the cover that makes you pick that book up before you turn to the back page and read the synopsis. Yeah, a bad cover will guarantee to be the death of a novel. So, but people underestimate that a little bit, I think, and sometimes cover artists and illustrators get a little bit of a bad deal when it comes down to the publicity and the workings of the industry around role playing, and also the big novel and writing industry as well, I think.
All right. So what about you, Walt? Has anybody asked for your John Hancock?
Comic book store / gaming store. A couple of my books were on the wall, and one of the patrons went to go pick it up, and the guy said, that guy over there that's looking at the rack, that guy, that's his. And they're like, he put it on consignment? He's like, no, he that's the, the publisher. And the guy came over and we had a nice conversation. And I asked if he wanted me to sign it. And he said, no, just sign this piece of paper. I'll stick it on the inside. Don't ruin my damn book.
That's a solid answer. I can respect the dedication. So, have you ever spotted someone reading your books or playing your games outside of gaming shops, or is that just generally where everyone goes to do it?
Yeah, I think for me, if that's where people go, it's kind of like you're going to bump into people at potentially convention, or you're going to bump into people in gaming shops. But apart from that, it's not the kind of thing you stand in a pub discussing, really. Not in the UK, anyway.
Well, it's funny because in my state we have a small brewery called Revival Brewing, and they're very excited about being in the state. A lot of their beers have state themes, and they host a gaming night like twice a week. People can come, have a meal, drink some beer, play D&D.
Nice.
Meet players from around the area. I was pretty stoked to see that happen. So yeah, right on.
All right. So finally, what's the weirdest or funniest story about an interaction you guys have had with a fan since you started your endeavor down this creative highway? So we'll start with you, John.
Oh my God, that's put me on the spot. Jesus.
No pressure.
It's no pressure. I suppose, I don't know, really. It's odd. I suppose it's kind of like, really, from my point of view, it's just when you attract the strange ones at a convention, and it's just like, I went to a convention down south and I had a little stall and was selling my artwork, and I'd created this picture, and I think at the time it was actually for Extreme Earth Walt. It was kind of like it was one of the characters from that setting, and he was kind of like a little bit like an Iron Man type character. And I'd done this illustration, and I actually had it on a canvas for sale.
Is that the one with all the advertising on his armor?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, I love that image. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the one. So I had that blown up on a canvas, and it was for sale. And this guy came up to me, and he must have spent about 2 hours stood there, and he basically was just telling me how much it looked like his Destiny character, and it was, and I just had to listen to 2 hours of him talking about Destiny to me, and I'm like, thinking, please just buy it and go away, But yeah, just odd things like that, really.
Is Destiny a game?
It's a video game.
It's a computer game. Oh, see, like how old-fashioned I am saying computer game. You don't say that. What is it now? It's a console game or whatever.
Yeah. It's kind of like Halo.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So normally we'd list out what these guys have written, but they're not that kind of creator. Well, Walt has several anthologies coming out and some novels that'll be out soon. But mostly these guys spill their words into the pages of various RPGs and their blood onto canvas for art. So let's dive into that RPG lifestyle. So what do you guys think makes a good RPG? And we'll start with Walt this time.
Ooh, that's going to be subjective to people, because what I might enjoy in a game, somebody else might not. I personally like games where the rules get out of the way and don't impede the story. If I have to stop the action at the table every 30 seconds to look up some obscure rule, that's not a fun game for me. If I'm playing, high school, the role-playing game, no, I'm all set. But some people like that level of adaptation from life to table, and I would never ever tear down somebody's fun. If that's fun to you, that's cool. I really enjoy stuff where and I apologize for the lapping noise. My warhound is getting his water on. I really enjoy games that progress story while giving you just enough mechanics to make it just random enough for the odd thing to happen. That gun failure, or your sword. Your sword, after whacking away at the bad guy's invincible armor, finally breaks, and now you need to find the weapon that's going to do it for you. And having that simple mechanic that progresses the story but stays out of the way, so that your head stays in the game and not in the book. And of course, don't knock, like John said, do not knock the power that really great art has on a game.
All right. What about you, John?
Well, I think I'm a bit with Walt, and then a bit against what Walt says, really, from my point of view, because I'm a bit kind of like, when I like crunch in my role playing games. So it's kind of like
we might have to define crunch, John.
yeah. So crunch is kind of like rules, yeah. So there's lately over the past few years, there's been kind of like a little bit of an urge of role playing creators to go very, very rules light. So some people like that, and some people don't. So when I say rules light, it's kind of like it's more about using the role-playing game to tell a story for the people around the table. So there's not many rules. It's based around, okay, you want to do that, the DM goes, and the GM goes on the fly. Yeah, sure, you can. Just roll that dice for me and we'll see how it works out. I've always been the opposite to that. I like a nice thick book. I've always been like that. I like a book that's got lots of rules, lots of background. What attracts me to role-playing games is, I like to pick up a large tome that's filled with plenty of artwork and has got a huge history in it. It might be that, say, for example, 50% of the book might just be backstory, but that's what I like. And I found over the past few years that's been lacking slightly in a lot of current books that come out, which is the reason why I tend to come up with a lot of homebrew stuff myself. So I'll come up with my own world and then think, and as an afterthought, it's like, oh my God, what rule system am I going to have to find to convert this to my setting or convert this to my way of thinking? But I like the chunky story, and I like substance in my games.
Okay.
Which is a bit different to what Walt's saying, I think.
All right, so there are a whole bunch of different types of role-playing games. For instance, Dungeons & Dragons Original was just imagination, and I haven't played it since, but I've seen it played, and now they have like little figurines and maps, and you march, and it's gone to that. But what's your favorite type? Because as I understand, there's also role-playing games that use nothing but cards as well. So what's your favorite type, John?
Yeah, well, I mean, occasionally you get these role-playing games that pop up to try and do something different, and a lot of times they fail. So the first thing about role-playing games to realize is that ultimately it's all about getting people around the table. Now, some people don't have the luxury of that. I've role-playing games in a lounge or sat in the back of a truck with 5 guys, and you've just sort of got on with it with a handful of dice and a piece of paper in your hands. And you've not even had a map or any kind of anything or figures, and it can be just as enjoyable. Sometimes I think people see it on TV. You look at things like, say, Stranger Things, and they still seem to think that people play with little figurines on maps. And yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, that has its place in role playing games, and I still do use those kind of things when I'm running for my group. But ultimately, it should be more about the narration and about people getting into their character and the storytelling aspects. You don't need gadgets. But yeah, I think for me, role-playing games come in different genres. So you can get your fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons. You can find hard science fiction games. You can find superhero games. You can find horror games, pulp games, you name it. It's all out there. And the good thing is you change. What 1 year I might run a fantasy game with my guys, and then you get a taste for some science fiction, and you run a science fiction game. Usually after you've seen a good movie or read a good book, because that's what normally happens to me when I go and see a good film or I read a good book and go, oh no, I've got to do a game based on that, and then that's what makes changes your appetites.
So when you say get into character, do you mean like to the level where people are doing accents and funny voices and dressing up? Or are you?
No. It's like when you talk to people who don't role play or who've not role played before, you get the old, do you put a wizard hat on? Do you put you get all that shit, don't you? Just swing swords around. And don't get me wrong, I remember being a kid at like 16, and yeah, people would kind of like bring in pretend swords or airsoft pistols if you played a cyberpunk and start playing. You do, but no, it's more a case of getting into character is just It's hard. It's hard to explain. There's nothing harder than trying to explain role playing to someone who say never role played. It's one of the worst questions to be asked. If I'm in a pub and someone says, "Oh, what do you do as a hobby?" You never say you're into role playing, because they're going to say to you, "Well, how does that work? How do you do it?" And it's so difficult. It's got elements of acting, but it's more about using your imagination to come out and play the character. And yes, sure, you can do accents, and sure, you can do that kind of stuff. And sometimes it adds to it, and it can be fun. But sometimes it can be a little bit over the top, if that go. And I suppose it depends on your gaming group. My group are quite reserved. So if we had a new player that came and was really, really putting on the accents and stuff, we'd be all cringing a little bit. You know what I mean?
Well, in all fairness, LARPing is a thing. So
yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
So what about you, Walt?
The simplest tools are always the best to me. I like the basics. If I'm going to do RPG stuff, I like something that's going to be fast at the table. That, like I said, is not going to get in my way. As far as like mechanics goes, you got games that use dice, cards. You got games that use funky dice that don't have numbers, instead have symbols. And those symbols have to be consulted for different things and different effects. So usually, I'm very simple when I if I'm playing my own system is just a dice pool system. My handful of dice versus your handful of dice to determine outcome, and that plays very well. There's games like Savage Worlds, and which is a generic game. So basically, you can kind of try and tailor it to any system, to any setting. Versus rather, no one game is good at emulating every type of story you're trying to tell. And I think Savage Worlds really plays well with like that pulp type of story, where it's normal people interacting with abnormal situations. You get some sense of powers or whatever, but they have, they've proven that they have a quick system that does a lot at the table, and it's a hybrid system. It uses both dice and cards, but just a regular standard deck of playing cards to start out, and then once you get comfortable with the system, they have like cards that have special effects that you can buy, and it's really fun. So I think, in my personal opinion, the whatever is going to generate fun at the table, and that feeling of randomness, because if you're not having that random element to simulate the chaos of life, you're basically just in a story group. It's just a bunch of people sitting around, doing improv. But once you add that game mechanic, the rules that put your characters in those situations, and then the rules that allow them to adjudicate those situations, now you're no longer just telling a collaborative story. You're actually playing a game where the possibility of failure exists, and that's what makes the game the game. Because if you can't fail or lose, and it's not like you can, oh well, I won Dungeons and Dragons tonight. That's not something people say. But if the character that you're running at the table doesn't have the ability to lose something, then there's no sense of tension, and that's really what we're all there for. We want that tension.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sometimes losing is what makes it a fun event to be part of as well. So, for example, it's kind of like you all have a favorite character that you played in the past, and usually the memories that you have, the fond memories, are when something's happened to that character. So you might be playing like a knightly swordsman who you might have played every week for a good 12 months, going to this guy's house to play, and then at the end of that 12 months he fought the big bad dragon at the end of it and went out in a blaze of glory, killed the dragon, but was killed himself. Now, in a way, you've lost that character. That character's gone. You've just invested 12 months of your weekly time to develop that character and to play it, and he's now gone. But the memory of the way you went out and the memory you had of that character feeds the imagination, and it makes it a fond memory and makes it a great character story to talk about and to remember. We all watch films, and sometimes you watch the films. Take, for example, you watch Aliens. So you've got Aliens, the movie, which is a fantastic movie, and you've got so many great, unique little characters in that film. Everyone's got a favourite, whether it's Drake or Vasquez or Bishop or whatever. Yeah, all great.
You're singing my song.
Yeah, precisely. All great characters, but at the end of it, 95% of them die. Yeah. But if you imagine that being in a role-playing game, that film could have been a role-playing session where you've got these great, unique characters with huge personalities, but they all end up dying a blaze of glory. But you can guarantee that the players would have walked away having a great time, and they will be sat in a pub years down the line talking about those characters that all died fighting the alien horde. And sometimes losing and the element of the fact that things can go wrong for your character is what makes it real for you, and that's the positive element of role playing.
Okay, so how do you feel about doing role playing games, but doing them over the internet, such as in Skype or Google Hangouts? Have you ever done it? We'll ask John first.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you see, this is a tough one, because this does depend on the type of game you're playing. So, for example, Walt is talking about kind of rules light, narrative type of games, and they are perfect for Google Hangouts because you don't need the hefty book element and the rules elements of it. While other games, you need to play over this tabletop software. There's one called Roll20 and there's one called Fantasy Grounds, and they're designed for you to sort of sit there and to have maps and to have figures that you can move and have a proper table role-playing element. I've tried both of them. I do struggle. I find that I recently had a situation with my group. I'm quite lucky because the group that I role play with are a bunch of friends that I've known since I was like 15 years old. And there's about 5 of us. And even now, 35 years later, we still meet up once a week and we role play. And that's quite a good experience to have. But recently we had a situation where we couldn't do that. So we tried to role play online using Roll20. We tried it, and we'd all meet up online on one night, and we'd run the system, we'd run the software, and we'd all be using our webcams, and we'd all see the little square box at the bottom, and we'd looking at each other. And it was good, but for me, it didn't have that same appeal. I struggled a bit. I didn't have the social elements, which I like in a role-playing game. There's nothing better than meeting up around a table at someone's house for a few beers and role-playing. I didn't get that. And also I found that it stunted role-playing a little bit. It became almost too much like you're playing a video game. So I do struggle. I do struggle greatly with them online.
Okay, well, what about you, John? Or sorry,
I know
Walt?
You do it on a regular basis.
What was that, John? I missed that.
I know you role play regularly on Google Hangouts, don't you? So you're different.
Yeah. Sorry, I swallowed my coffee down the wrong pipe. I really enjoy the online aspect that has emerged because there are now digital tabletops that can be as immersive if you know what you're doing, and it takes a little time, a little bit of preparation, a little bit of investment into getting what you want. But I mean, you have one called Fantasy Grounds that is game dedicated, so the games are built into the digital tabletop. You have Roll20, which has some of those aspects, but if you wanted to run John's Aliens game and you wanted to run it using the Cyberpunk engine, you could do that on Roll20 because it's basically acting as a digital tabletop. So those miniatures you were talking about earlier, you can get in some cases for free. In other cases, you can buy custom ones. You can get digital tokens that look kind of like those miniatures. Put them on the maps that you can download and create on this digital tabletop. And now instead of just theater of the mind, a bunch of guys talking over Skype, you have an interface where you can see the table. Along the bottom of the screen, there's a video aspect. So, like just like in a Google Hangout, you have everybody's video box where they're hanging out and talking and doing whatever, and then the game table is in front of everybody. These digital spaces have cool things like animations and special effects, like if a wizard throws his lightning hand at somebody, he flips the middle finger to the gods and it shoots a lightning bolt. There's actual lightning animations that you can use to direct that bolt toward whatever the target is, and it makes it gives you that kind of fun at the table. You can integrate music. If you're looking for a little bit of mood, say you're running something out of Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, and you want that like spooky, creepy, music, or you want like a little sound effect, like a door creaking, and the first time I ever saw that on a digital table, I was like, "Did my cat just move my damn door?" But it wasn't. It was actual sound effects coming from the digital tabletop. You can do handouts. So, like when we were playtesting, John's amazing. And if you do not own this, even if you are not a role playing gamer, you should immediately go out and pick up a copy of Extreme Earth. For the art is mind numbingly good. But imagine if Jack Bauer had superpowers.
Oh, geez.
Right?
Okay.
But not like every Jack Bauer is a Superman, but like everybody just there are people in society who are empowered, kind of like the Heroes TV show that was in the early 2000s. And a lot of these, some of these people are recruited into service, and they do dirty stuff behind the scenes, and it's. Yes, and there's an alternate history that goes with it. It's just amazingly good. We were doing a series of games on the BAMF podcast to show the different systems that John had commissioned to debut this game, because he wrote the game so that it could be used in multiple systems. And we did a series of games where we ran it in a system called Mutants and Masterminds, and then we did a series of games in another one called Icons, and then we did a series of games in my game system, which is Super's Revised Edition. And I had handouts for submarines. I had bad guys, maps, sound effects. And this is all stuff you can. And the great thing about these digital tabletops is everything is drag and drop. If you need a map for a warehouse because your superhero character is going to bust in on the drug ring that's operating out of this warehouse, you type in drug ring warehouse into the search engine that's a part of the digital tabletop, and 9 times out of 10 there's going to be a map there that you can use. You drag it over, expand it to what you need, add extra elements like the coffee table, or the fact that these particular drug dealers are refined. They don't drink like tequila and stuff. They drink coffee and eat scones. You can put you can put a table like that with all that crap on it right in the middle. And now your role-playing game characters can bust in. There's dice mechanics programmed in so that you can roll digital dice. It's a randomizer, and you can bust your tea-drinking, scone-eating drug dealers. And it's if you take the time to learn the interface, and there are new ones springing up all the time. So if one isn't your cup of tea or your scone, then there's probably one out there that might be more tailored toward the way you play. So I enjoy it, and usually as part of the BAMF podcast, and now one of the sister podcasts, which is called Babies with Knives, which is the greatest name ever. We usually have a digital or a virtual game, and we use those virtual tables to kind of bring a little more breath into it. So yeah, it's fun.
Wow, I had
And
no
you just
idea.
gave me a crazy crap ton of links. So thanks for for making the post show, making it worth it. So I've looked at all of you guys' games, and they all sound amazing. But today we wanted to focus on your game title, your game titled The After. However, before we dig in, can we just take a moment to say that I thought your game art is amazing? I've seen the quick start guide, and the images are simply gorgeous. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's basically intro quick session for starter kit type deal for RPGs. At least that's my understanding. So did you guys, when you're picking the art, is that something that you're looking for specific? Like basically, I know you both draw, and I know but you don't always necessarily make your own art, or do you?
John
and then
does.
what do you okay? And what do you think makes good art for an RPG? Is there a certain style?
Okay, so the art in RPGs, it can be very, very hit and miss. And can I just say for the record that, I consider myself an artist, but believe me, there are a shitload of guys who have got a shitload more talent than I have. Okay, there are fantastic artists out there.
He's being modest.
No, I'm not. Trust me. It's very. I can browse artwork sites all day long and almost feel like hanging up the pencils, if you know what I mean, because it's very much like that. But I think the key to good art in a game is very much what, like I discussed about the good art for a cover. Whoever publishes or produces the game has to understand the impact that the art will have on that game. And it's either going to be positive impact or it's going to be negative impact. Okay, so a crap cover will not sell you your book. Okay, crap artwork in a role-playing game will not sell you your game, for a start. In fact, it can detract people from the game itself. There's nothing worse than then you'll get a publisher, and unfortunately, this can be. You get a lot of small press publishers who don't have a massive budget, and sometimes the last thing they think about is artwork. So they'll go out and they'll just get stock art. They'll buy very, very cheap art. They won't actually go to an illustrator to sort of say, look, I need a picture of this doing. They'll just buy art off the internet, and they'll just start filling the books, empty spaces after the layout is done with this random art. And it's on different styles, and it will destroy the book. And that's me talking from an illustrator, but also talking from someone who's also involved in publishing role-playing games. I've been quite fortunate where, from a financial point of view, I'm quite in a fortunate position where, like most guys, I've got a proper full-time day job that pays the bills. And the art for me is something I enjoy doing, that I can make money out of, but I don't need the art to survive. Yeah. So I can be quite good in the fact that I can spend time on it. So I can get an idea for a book, such as The After or Extreme Earth we talked about, and I can think, okay, and I can spend my time creating artwork for it. I've not got the pressure of thinking this has got to be out next week, or, oh my God, I can't afford to pay someone to do the artwork. I can do it myself. And that's a positive thing in a way, because I can make sure the book I produce has got the artwork I want for it. I mean, I would have no qualms about hiring another illustrator if I wanted additional art, but I would then put my art director's hat on and want to make sure that the art is of a standard or of a similar style to what I want the book to have. It doesn't have to be full color. There are some awesome black and white artists out there. There's artists who just do pencil artwork, which is absolutely stunning. It doesn't have to be all this full color, beautiful digital art. It's just making sure the artwork fits the writing and is relevant to the book itself. That's my opinion.
He's being modest about his day job, so I don't know how many Anglophiles we have in the listening audience. But if you've heard of MI6, James Bond, John actually works for MI6 and a half. All right. So what about you, Walt? What do you think makes good art?
I'm just going to go with what John said. I mean, when you have a product that is ramrod with disparate images, it really becomes more of a distraction than what you want, and you want those images to invoke what is in the book. It's kind of like when you buy a comic book and they have these amazing cover artists that are just like, wow. And then you open it and it looks like something out of, Cartoon, Network. And you're like, what the hell is this? They spent all this money on a cover and then didn't spend any money on the interior art. It's the same thing for a role-playing game book. You could have, you pick up a role-playing game book and it can have a sweet cover or what have you. And then you open the book and it's just, stock art with no sense of art direction. They just needed something, and this looks about right, so I'm just going to plug it in. So yeah, I totally agree with John. If you have somebody that an art director that can develop a sense of style for a book and brings in art pieces that enhances the product versus distracts from it, I think that makes all the difference. And John, like I said, John's art is I am a huge fan of John's art, not just because I work with him, but just because his sense of style and scope, his ability to gauge color to convey mood, is just, for an artist, when you look at somebody who you want to rise to that level, to see the tricks and tips and neat things that they can do with their art. John, I said it a few minutes ago, John is being modest. And while he might have people he wants to aspire to, John's level of detail and ability to convey that mood and sense of scene in an image, I think is unparalleled in a lot of mediums. So right on.
That's very nice to say.
All right. So now that we've talked about your stunning art, we can dive deeper into the game itself. This is a question either one of you can answer. In fact, the next 3 questions, are directed at you jointly. So how did you guys come up with the premise for the After universe? Where did the spark of inspiration come from?
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the American West and the cowboy life. I just, even though I'm from the UK, it's a massive thing for me. I mean, Wild Western films are probably my favorite genre. I eat it up whenever I come across it. So I've always been interested in the frontier and that kind of like a American West spirit that you see in a lot of these films. I'm also a big fan of post-apocalyptic stories. We all like a good Mad Max or a kind of Road Warrior type story. And, it was kind of like it originally came up from thinking about a potential mashup of those two ideas. I actually, where the premise for the book came around was I wanted to have this kind of Western frontier vibe mixing with the post-apocalyptic vibe that I had going on. And what I was missing was the potential post-apocalyptic event that started it all. And we know zombies have been done to death. Third World War has been done to death. The plague, the DNA plague has been done to death.
Don't forget the Kardashians.
Yeah. Precisely, you know what I mean. And I think what it was is there was I was browsing the internet like you do in these boring times of occasionally, and I came across this thing called I think it's called the Fermi paradox, Fermix. You should read it if you get a chance. It's only short, it's only a few pages, and basically what it talks about is the fact that it tries to come up with a reason why we seem to be alone in the universe. Yeah, this paradox. And it says, in a universe that's so vast and has got so many galaxies and so many spiral arms of different universes out there, it's endless. Why is it that, we seem to be alone? And it gives a few pointers on reasons why. And obviously you've got the one, for example, like the universe is so vast that maybe just we are in the equivalent of kind of like the Amazon jungle in Victorian times, and no one has ever reached us. But one of the reasons that scientists give, which is quite a scary reason really, is a possibility that there's some kind of super predator race out there. And this super predator race regularly monitors the universe. If any race pops up that gets past a certain level of technology, it goes, okay, you've got as far as we're going to let you know, and that's it. And it closed the race down. And I just thought that's an interesting idea. That'd be quite a cool idea for the reason why you've got this post-apocalyptic event that such a race turns up, you know. So that's where it started. That's where the concept came around of this alien invasion, which wasn't really an alien invasion. It's an alien eradication. Basically, this alien race turned up to shut it down completely, wipe mankind off the face of the universe, and then move on. And then I kind of thought, well, okay, how do I get the Western vibe? So I thought, well, you know what? Let's set it in America. Let's set it in and what I did here, I kind of like looked again the old magic Google. So I looked at the kind of most lesser habitated areas in America, and Wyoming as a state has got a very small population. And I thought, well, okay, if you're going to survive something like that, you're probably going to come from a place that's not going to get a huge amount of alien activity because there's not a lot going on there in the first place. So that gave me the location, which is Wyoming. And let's face it, Wyoming's stock cowboys full and through, isn't it? So that also fed the cowboy, the Wild West side of it. And I thought, well, okay, if it's 100 years after and people are now crawling out and just starting to make new lives for themselves, they're going to probably go back to old ways, pre-industrial technology, because technology is not really now around. So they go back to the old horse and saddle frontier lifestyle in this changed world that's been changed by alien races, basically. And that's where the concept came from.
All right, so we read the blurb and the product reviews for comparisons, but I guess I'm not versed enough in these more modern role playing games. I mean, it was Dungeons and Dragons, red box, and I even had the gold Immortal box, if y'all remember that. So we'll punt and ask you instead. Okay, so for our listeners who are gamers, what would you compare the After to? Or is there a comparison, or is it just so unique?
When we were first bouncing this around, the group of us that usually talk about new projects, the thing that struck me about this was there was a video game that came out about 5 to 8 years ago, and they were pretty ambitious. What they did was they created the game and then also launched a companion TV show at the same time. And that TV show was called Defiance. And the idea was some aliens who had been kind of on the search for a new home end up crash landing on Earth. But before they crash, they end up in a huge space battle with another race. So you end up with like all these different races on crash landing to Earth, and occasionally pieces of technology still in orbit fall to Earth, and it's like a gold rush. Everybody races to go, get the fallen technology and kind of use it. When John was first, saying that he wanted to develop this product, it really struck me like that, except instead of Defiance that takes place where technology is coming back and they still have the ability to form communities that have toiletries and basic plumbing and water and stuff like that. John's version was much more dark. People got their asses handed to them and got spanked hard, and as a result, you have that Wild West vibe, but yet things are not the way, you're not just going to get Clint Eastwood riding up and throwing his Serape over his shoulder and going, "You feeling lucky? You insulted my burrow." I mean, it's not going to be exactly like that, because Clint might have the ability to crush your little head with his mind. There are strange things that have occurred since, the SmackDown. And because of that, there are unknown things that are out there and can really mess up your day. And if you're not, smart about it, you're going to have a bad run.
So this is almost like an alternate history, but we've been thrown back into that time just due to circumstance.
Yeah, I think because the concept was that obviously you had this alien race that turned up for eradication purposes, and they did. I mean, literally, I'm not being funny, but it's kind of like that. I think it's I can't think if it was Stephen Hawking who turned around and said something on the lines of, if an alien race did decide to come here, it would be like it would be like the Native American people meeting the Westerners for the first time. That's the impact it would have on our society. It would be. I mean, literally, if we looked out of our windows tonight and saw alien vessels landing, even if they were friendly, our society and structure would change overnight, without a doubt. The momentous occasion of what that would mean to the human race, from a religious point of view to a technological and a social point of view, would be absolutely a huge impact. And that's if it was going well, So
that's if they liked the root beer.
Precisely, yeah. So if this race turned up that were like, we're here, we don't want to talk to you, we're not interested, we view you as ants to just get rid of, and they have got the capability of doing that completely, and you've been utterly powerless. You fire your nukes off and they just don't dent them. Your troops have not got a chance. They sit in orbit and bombard the planet, so there's nothing left of any kind of military installations before you even get to talk to these creatures. It would just devastate society. And the premise of the book is that 90% of it was done. The population has dropped to probably about 5% of what it was, and only the people who were able to run to the hills and hide out by going back to the old ways of survival and looking after each other in more primitive means have been able to survive.
That was a go ahead.
Fortunately, fortunate and ill-fortunate is another alien race turns up, and it transpires that the original alien race, who were called the Butchers by mankind, because there's no communication, no one knows, and that's the thing about the book, no one knows who they were, no one knows what they were called, there was no communication, they just became known as the Butchers for what they did. Another race turns up who are another enemy of the Butchers, and these two races have spent their entire lifespan around the universe fighting each other. So this race turns up and has a war in the solar system with the Butchers, which is just as devastating, because anyone that's left suddenly finds themselves watching this solar system spanning destructive war where, all you can do is just keep your head down and hope that a bloody ship doesn't land on, the wreckage or something doesn't obliterate your neighborhood, And at the end of that, because this other race were dimensional traveling beings, dimensional portals have opened. When one of their ships crashed, it might have caused a sort of rip in the dimensional space. So the land now that people find themselves in, the aliens have gone. They've disappeared. They went suddenly. Their war ended and then they left. And it's now about 20 years after the aliens have gone. So humans are now resurfacing, discovering what's left of the world, trying to make a society, and discovering that things have changed, both in an environmental point of view, these strange breach zones. There's aliens that have been left, slave races and parasites that originally came down with the original aliens have been left and abandoned on Earth. So it's it's kind of like, imagine the film The Revenant. So imagine The Revenant being set with that level of technology, but you're traveling through the wilderness, hunting alien relics and disturbing strange creatures that have been left behind. That's the kind of premise for it.
Okay. So the that what happens to society is part of what made that universe fun. So, full disclosure, I mentioned in the beginning, but the anthology he's hosting once this game goes fully live, I wrote a short story for it, and I actually got to play with that. I made Pistol Pete, the mascot for the University of Wyoming, inadvertently becomes a god, because they don't know any better, because society was crushed, and they just see the statues or whatever, and they think it must mean, something. So that's what made that setting kind of fun. There's so much room to do your own thing. I think that seems to be what makes RPGs more playable, if it's less rigid.
Yeah, absolutely. And And like I say, I mean, it probably stems back to what we discussed early on about what we like about role-playing games. And I do like the crunch, and I like to have a book that's got a lot of details in it. So fortunately, we've got a writer called Sean No.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that archived episode that was in the digital memory hole that we found. We thought you'd enjoy it. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the archive for the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.